The main thing we wanted to talk about today was pre-pruning. So it's the very first task, really. You start doing this in December.
Ideally, yeah, if the weather permits, we would like to start doing that. If all the nets are rolled up and we're on schedule with that, we can move into. Well, first we would do bud collections, dissections to kind of best inform ourselves of what method of pruning we want to apply. And then site by site, like some of our sites are not conducive to using the tractor and pre-pruner if there's a lot of snow, if there's a lot of melt. So it's every year is a bit of a different monster to organize and tackle how we're going to approach it. But definitely we want to use the pre-pruner where we can, because it definitely saves us time with our pruners on the ground as far as time to clear off vines and get through the pruning process.
What do you think that time savings is?
Oh, it's hard to put a number on it off the top of my head, but I would think it would save hours per acre off of our needed man hours,
Well, how many hours per acre does it take?
Pruning typically can take between 20 to 30 hours per acre is how we budget it out, depending on pruning style, depending on if you can get a pre-pruner in there. So I'm guessing off the top of my head, without looking at the numbers, I would say probably 5 hours per acre average you could save.
And how long does it take to pre-prune an acre?
Probably about an hour and a half, depending on terrain.
Depending on whether you get hung up on something.
If you grab some wires and need to untangle yourself, certainly.
Yeah. At home.
Yeah, I guess. Well, my first experience with tractors was when I went back to school at Niagara College. We did equipment training for groundskeeping, kind of maintenance, mowing, and simple things like that. But then when I got into research and doing multiple pesticide applications, different field work, fertilizer application, it really opened my eyes to how adaptable and diverse the role of the tractor is in all different forms of agriculture. And in particular in viticulture, now that I've been at it for a few years, we can save a lot of time when we can try to balance the efficiency of using mechanical means to get jobs done with actual handwork as well. So it's a very diverse tool for many different purposes.
Yeah, I guess when I was at Arterra, I thought, a tractor is your production, is your production line. So there's a hand crew, and they do all the finesse work. But really the backbone of Arterra was always the tractors, the tractor operators, and that's where all the heavy lifting is done. And that's where all of the risk management is being done with a tractor. So, and then I was like trying to think about framing this discussion, and I thought, if the tractor were taken away from you, so if there's a breakdown of that tractor, how is it how are you feeling about that?
Well, in mid-season, if the tractor goes down, it becomes top priority to get that thing to our mechanic or fix it in field if possible, or find a replacement for it as soon as possible. Because it is kind of the driving force behind our operations, really. It's always the first thing needed to get jobs going, right? And your hand crews kind of follow behind.
And that's the funny thing
of the tractor
is when that tractor goes down, the manager goes down. Because that manager is now 100% focused on that tractor, is like that tire, experience. So you got to take the tire off, you got to take it to the tire guy, it's got to get replaced. Then, by the time you roll that tire back on the tractor, that's when the manager, becomes available. Or, if you're lucky enough to have a mechanic, then you can just sort of delegate that particular job to the mechanic. But it doesn't matter, like all hands on deck kind of thing to get that tractor up and rolling, because it's going to be required, or else it's going to cost a lot of money or something. There's going to be some sort of bad event that's going to happen down the line. The other thing about tractors is, the thing that surprised me is fuel efficiency. So can you talk about what, you know, how much does it cost to operate a tractor?
I've been pretty surprised, like since I started using tractors and doing field work, they're quite fuel efficient. They just kind of sip on the diesel as you're doing heavy work with them too.
Roaring at, you know, high RPMs, you know, at lower RPMs they use even less fuel. So
I guess it's just different than we think of automobiles because we're always go kind of fast.
A car probably uses more fuel.
I think so, absolutely.
Because that's like 12 liters every 100 kilometers or 15 liters. So a car uses exponentially more per hour than a tractor does.
Absolutely.
The thing is that, you know, it's really good at going over rough ground. It pulls a lot of stuff. It has hydraulics. It runs equipment. What else does it do?
I think you kind of nailed it. Like, I mean, it's a very versatile tool. I can think from the start of the season, we run it for pre-pruning, then we'll get into flail mowing when pruning's complete. Then we'll be getting into getting sprays going, so we use them for running our sprayers, weed spraying. Then through the season, we have a de-leafer machine that we will run when it comes time for that. I mean, mainly, probably the most hours spent in viticulture on a tractor would be spraying throughout the season. And then as we move into harvest, you'll be creeping along with your bins, doing the harvest. I mean, they are, the backbone of all aspects of the viticulture season.
Yeah. It's probably the time in which a tractor isn't rolling within your company would be...
Well, we're always pushed by our leadership kind of to keep the equipment rolling, you know?
Right.
And always be focusing on what could we be adapting and mechanizing better, you know, and trying to use newer technology wherever possible to improve our efficiency and save time, because time is money.
And maybe later we can also talk about your truck and how you haul it around, trailers, you know, whether there needs to be shops, mechanics, like there's a whole infrastructure behind the tractor that most people don't really kind of understand and realize. And every tractor has its own personality, even if it's the same model number.
True.
Yep. And a cost of a tractor?
Varies really, but I'd say average around the $50,000 mark, plus or minus, depending on your cab options. Yeah, about that. Car or truck.
Yeah.
I mean, the heavy hauling trucks we use are about 80,000 new now.
Yep. Pretty reasonable, but also...
it's expensive, but for the amount of travel that we use them for and the mobility that they allow us, I think they pay for themselves, you know?
Yeah, for sure. How reliable is a pre-pruner? Does it break down frequently?
I mean, there's anything with hydraulics, there's potential for broken lines, leaks, things of that sort. But my experience on this model of pre-pruner, it's quite reliable.
Yeah.
Even if you make an error and grab some wire, it's pretty easily solvable, fixable.
Yeah, you know? It's not fragile.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Surprisingly.
Yeah.
Surprisingly dangerous, like blades are flying through that.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
it can be. You never want to have anything running while you're outside of the cab,
yeah,
inspecting or cleaning or anything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's safety first, of course.
Like, you know, what makes a good operator?
I think attention to detail, like understanding your machine and treating it like it's your own, and checking things out before you ever start work. I mean, people always push the safety check, but I think it's very important to always consistently stick with that and not get lazy.
Yeah.
Like you should always be checking oil, and that's what when I'm training guys, I always tell them, if you check nothing else, check the engine oil, right? But really every time you hop on something, you should be checking things to make sure you're not setting yourself up for problems.
All right, so what am I looking at here?
This is our Kubota M7040 hooked up with a bigger pre-pruner. We call this one K3. just so we keep track of our equipment and know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's a cab Kubota tractor.
Yep.
Narrow version for working in orchards, vineyards. And then the...
What we got here? We got, so we got a, a frame. The frame's actually meant so it can split, right? Usually.
Yeah.
So then you got a engine, and then, super simple, but it doesn't look like a car engine. It's made for torque. And then, the action of what the tractor really is, in my opinion, anyways, is the transmission. The transmission goes right to the very back. So you're looking at something that has a giant transmission, so it's able to use every ounce of power that... So a tractor has, what, 70 horsepower? That's what the 70-40 is?
Yeah, it varies from about 60 to 80, I think most of the ones we're running.
Yeah. It's only 70 horsepower, but yet it's able to, in terms of the torque, uses a lot of torque. And then suspension is actually fairly basic, but it's really a rugged piece of equipment.
Oh yeah, it can go over pretty rough terrain, no problem. And then you got your PTO on the back here for power takeoff, where you can run various tools like sprayers, mowers,
hydraulics
for other various tools. We also hook them up. We have a compost spreader we can run off the PTO as well.
And then check this out. Hydraulics go all the way to the front to a hydraulic manifold, right? And then, so it comes down from there all the way up here. Boom, boom, boom. You just run some basic hydraulic motors. It seems, either complicated or simple, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
And then all we have here is just some rotating spindles with some finishing blades at the very bottom, right? So
yes, sir.
This thing just sort of like crushes it, basically. It doesn't even cut it.
No.
It's not like
it's a pretty rough, rugged kind of
and it's just
bone saw.
Yeah, and then it's got some sort of like, yeah.
But simple and effective.
Pretty simple.
One thing I was surprised when I first started running these was how well designed they are for actually not grabbing the trellis wires.
Yeah.
With how close a contact, really, you're always touching them as you go, but these kind of it's designed so that it guides the wires through and you don't do any damage.
It just overlaps.
Usually.
And then the wires will slip up and down as they see fit.
Yeah.
You ever get wire wrapped in that? Or?
Oh, I've done that a couple times.
How long does that take to fix?
Depends how quick you shut it all down once you grab that wire.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's when you're training to use these, what I always tell my guys if I'm training them is just keep an eye on that, and if as soon as you see it go wrong, always be ready to shut everything down.
Yeah.
Is kind of a good thing to always keep in mind, right?
Yeah. Need a pair of leather gloves,
wire snippers, and patience.
Safety glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you get a wire in your hand, that's kind of a big deal. That's antibiotics for like a week and
that's no
a visit to the emergency room.
Make sure you have your tetanus shot.
Automatic, yeah. Okay, well maybe we fire this thing up and let it run for a bit.
Fire it up.
So you just did your 360 walk. You always say check the oil.
Tires are good. I always like to check the oil before I do anything.
This is a model of how to do things.
Keep an eye on if there's any leaks as you walk up to your equipment is always a good idea. Because if something's gone wrong, usually you'll see evidence of it on the ground.
No battery leaks. You're looking for, something that pops out as being not so good. Your belt should be tight. It's
always good to check your air filter too. Make sure your engine's breathing so it's burning efficiently. Got an inner and an outer air filter. It's not usually too bad this time of year, but in the middle of summer, especially if you're doing mowing, making a lot of dust, this thing will get caked up pretty good.
So that's the pre-trip. You guys have books and stuff that you have to fill out, or?
We actually have a new app that we got through AgSafe that we're going to be using, so that each operator, before they do any work, documents their circle check, as well as verifies the hours on the piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And then it just gives us an easy record that people are doing the proper checks.
You got your steel toe boots on?
Oh yeah, always. Ready for action.
Glow plugs.
This tractor was already warmed up earlier today, so the glow plugs are happy. But typically on a diesel engine, you flip the key, it'll show a little indicator, which is not showing now because it's already been warmed up. But the glow plugs warm up before you fire the engine.
Yep.
Because a diesel engine works on compression rather than fire like a gasoline engine.
Yep.
So here we go.
Woo!
If you want to walk around this way, I'll fire it up just to warm it up.